Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the sound of British amplifiers. The term British sound or British amp sound is one that gets thrown around quite a lot, but for those who may be less in the know, it can be a bit of a confusing term, because what does British really sound like? Well, today we're going to be going through that, so we'll start off by talking about the general characteristics which a lot of these amps share, and the reasons why the amps have these characteristics. And then I'll take you through a few different examples of British amps just so you can maybe get your ear in a little bit and hear what they actually sound like. But to start off with, effectively all that someone means when they say British guitar sound or British amp sound is a specific sound. Now that specific sound generally has more of a mid-range focus, and if you're talking about overdriven tones, it tends to be a bit more of a crunchy overdrive compared to the smoother saturation that you tend to get with American amps. British amps also tend to lack the low-end thump and big bottom end that you get with American amps, but in exchange you often get more of a chimey top end or a sparkle, some might say, especially with clean tones on things like a Vox. Now I've just mentioned one brand there, but there's quite a few brands that are referred to as British tones. The big one obviously being Marshall, but this also extends to Vox, Laney, Hiwatt, Orange and countless others, but those really to me are the key ones. So what is it that gives all of these amps a similar characteristic? Well, there's a few things, and a lot of it does have to do with the fact that they were, or at least were originally, designed and made in England. Now I say this because, of course, compared to over the pond in America, the parts that are going to be available to builders are going to be different. So really the main thing that people always gravitate to when talking about British versus American amps is the power tubes. Now of course this does only apply to valve amps, but I think broadly when we're talking about guitar amps it's always valve amps that we're referring to. And when it comes to British guitar amps, really there are three main types of power tube that you get in them, those being the EL84 and EL34. These two I tend to think of as being very much the same. It's just varying amounts of headroom and power output and that sort of thing that vary between the two. And of course there are variants of both of these types of tube beyond just EL34 and 84. And I think those are the most common two types that you see. The other one that doesn't get mentioned as often is KT66 and 88. These are more known for having a big clean headroom and a smoother compression, but you don't see them used as often. The big one that comes to mind who used them early on in their amps was Orange. But really your EL34s and 84s are going to be your bread and butter and what you come across most often when you're looking at British amps. Another key part of what gives British amps their sound is the amount or lack thereof of negative feedback that's built into their circuits. I know certainly with the Vox AC amps that was one of the first things they did, is completely strip out the negative feedback, and that's why the Vox AC range of amps have that nice sparkly top end that they're so well known for. British amps also tend to have slightly simpler tone stacks when compared to their American counterparts, which also gives a certain flavour to the sound. And just from the nature of the tubes, British amps tend to overdrive gradually and in a slightly more harmonic and crunchy way, whereas with an American amp, when you dial the gain in, generally you will get a harsher clipping and a more compressed, saturated sound far quicker than you will with a British amp. Now of course there are a number of other things, and really everything in an amp circuit is going to make a difference to the way it sounds. That includes things like power transformers and power supplies, as well as other factors outside of the circuit such as the way the cabinets are made and the wood they're made from. But these tend to be more minor little things that all just, play their little part into the sound. The final thing that to me does make a bigger difference that often gets overlooked in the British versus American sound comparison is the speakers. Because again, the available speakers to manufacturers, especially in the early days, sort of 50s, 60s and even into the 70s before things went as international. The manufacturers of the speakers in which the guitar amp makers could buy them from was limited to what was available in that country. So generally in a lot of British amps you tend to see Celestion speakers. So whether that's Alnico Blue, Greenback, Creamback, Vintage 30, you know, all of the Celestion speakers that we know today. But the speaker does play quite a big part in the sound of your amp, and so it does make a difference. And that is a part of the reason for the sound, especially when you think to your earlier sort of more iconic and classic amps, because you've got your Celestions and your British, and the American amps for that sort of time period especially tended to be more Jensen, Eminence, that sort of thing. Obviously now you get Celestion speakers in American amps and Jensen and Eminence in British amps, but for your classic British tone this is also a part of it. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea as to the contributing factors and why the amps sound the way they do. But now you'll probably be wanting to see if you can hear these things at play as well. So I'm going to take you through 3 amps. Here I have a Vox AC15, a Marshall Plexi SV20, which is a 20 watt plexi head, and then as you can see behind me in the back of shot here, an orange Dark Terror. I'm going to take you through a clean tone with the Vox, a mid-gain crunchy tone with the Marshall, and then a high gain tone with the orange. Both the Vox and the orange are running EL84 tubes, and the Marshall is running EL34s. All of these amps are being played through the same Celestion Greenback IR, and for all of the amps I'm going to be playing my Gibson SG. So let's check out the Vox first. So that's the Vox, and hopefully you can hear some of that sparkly top end that comes with the reduction in negative feedback, as well as that sort of fairly direct and punchy sort of mid-range. So that's our clean tone. Now let's switch over to the Marshall for a bit more of a crunchy tone. And so that's the Marshall with a crunchy sort of tone, and as you can hopefully hear, it really is that iconic classic rock tone that will take you from everything from really Led Zeppelin through to AC/DC and all that sort of great stuff. Again, it has that quite mid-focused and slightly brighter sound when compared to its American counterparts, and it's a bit of a harsher and, like I said, crunchy distortion. It doesn't really have that smoother lead sort of tone that you expect from a more American style amps. And now finally let's switch over to something higher gain and a bit more modern in the Orange Dark Terror. I know the tones and these amps that I've showed you today are quite different in the way that they sound, but to my ear at least there is still some element of the sound of each of them which ties them together and fits in line with this sort of British sound. And I think a lot of that does come down to the tubes and the speakers. But hopefully that's gone some way to give you an idea of what the British sound is and giving your ear something to associate what we talked about at the start of the video with. But I think that's going to just about do us for today. So let me know down in the comments whether you prefer British or American amps and your thoughts on the tones that you've heard today. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.